It's easy to run out of superlatives here. Europe's largest marshalling yard is also where the longest train in Germany, measuring an impressive 2,700 feet, is put together. The station itself is a gigantic maze of tracks, totaling 160 miles. We want to take a closer look at this and have traveled to Maschen, 15 miles south of Hamburg. Standing at ground level, we can only guess the incredible dimensions of the second largest marshalling yard in the world. Railway tracks seem to stretch as far as the eye can see in all directions. Only when airborne do we get an idea of this gigantic size. 1 million wagons arrive here every year. That makes several hundred trains a day. They all have to be uncoupled, sorted out and reassembled, like a gigantic puzzle, especially when it comes to the longest train in Germany. It transports food, industrial parts, cars and petrol to Scandinavia. To make this happen, the schedule is very tight. The train must be ready in a few hours, but how's that done? 40 wagons with a length of 2,700 feet. We accompany the birth of Germany's longest train. 6 o'clock in the morning. A train is just arriving from Cologne, delivering the final wagons for our record-breaking train. Now, the employees in Maschen have exactly 6 hours to solve this XXL puzzle on rails, and we're allowed to watch them do it. The switcher gets things going. Eric Hilgert is one of them. He uncouples the train, separating the individual wagons and breaking the train down to individual units. A really tough job.
The longest I've ever had was 43 wagons. Some couplings weigh up to 35 kilos, and if you have to lift up to 20 to 30 of them, you can definitely do some damage to your back.
The switcher has to release the heavy iron couplings that hold the wagons together by hand. This gets even more difficult if the train driver stops the train the wrong way. If the connections are under tension, they're particularly difficult to release. The technical term for this is elongated.
The train's elongated when it's pulled an inch or two apart. The screw coupling then becomes so tight that you can't get it to move. I always complain to the drivers when the train's elongated. At 2,300 feet, always having to wait just eats up time.
And the switcher doesn't have much time. Now there are only 4 hours left until departure. Time for the shunting driver to get involved. He must now move the detached wagons. And Wolfgang Paul does this with the necessary calmness.
I've been here 37 years, so it's probably not that special anymore. But that's the way it is. I mean, if it was any smaller, I'd be riding this track right now. You can't really see the size when you sat here on the locomotive.
Only when airborne, the gigantic dimensions can be seen. The task begins. The shunting locomotive pushes the loose wagons to where they are distributed. That, however, is done by a computer, which controls the speed. Wolfgang Paul's only task is stopping the train in an emergency.
I'm responsible for the emergency stop foot switch, so if I fall asleep or become unconscious or can't see what's happening, then the locomotive stops after a certain time. Wolfgang, come in please. 41 to the train. All right, we're starting.
At walking speed, the shunting locomotive pushes the wagons along the track. The shunter can't see what's going on at the front. A third person is responsible for this.
My 2 eyes have to be enough. Now, the watchman stands there at the front. The colleague who checks the train keeps an eye on the front as well. That's what he's there for, because I can't see everything here. When I say I'm starting, then he has to say if something's not right, or shout stop or something, if someone's in the way, whatever. But that hasn't really happened up to now.
1,600 tons are now moving towards the so-called hump. Due to the height difference of 10 feet, the railway wagons roll onto one of the 48 shunting tracks using their own weight. The computer controls the speed using a retarder brake. High-speed switches ensure that the wagons end up on the right track. There are now only 3 hours left. And this is how the puzzle works. The split-up train from Cologne has a total of 32 wagons. The yellow ones have to go to Lübeck, the pink ones to Hamburg Harbour, and the green ones belong to our record train. Here in Maschen, these wagons are now sorted like toy trains. All wagons for the record train are moved to track 2036, where the remaining wagons for the longest train in Germany, number 44724 to Denmark, are already waiting. Watching over the supersized puzzle is the so-called hump master. It has to be ready in just under 2 hours. From his tower, Christian Möller monitors the rolling. In an emergency, he can take control away from the computer immediately.
This is for all emergencies. For locomotives, if anything goes wrong with it, an accident or something, then I can make an emergency stop here. Or for all the conveyors. This is the emergency stop here to stop people getting hurt.
Christian Möller has been working for the railway for 40 years. For 30 years he has been the hump master in Maschen. He loves the variety and the challenges of the job at Europe's largest marshalling yard.
At a little station, there are 2 trains a day, whereas here there's 1 train after the other, and particularly from the port, they just keep coming.
The port of Hamburg is the reason why the largest marshalling yard in Europe was built here. A gigantic amount of goods and containers arrive by ship every day. This is why there used to be 5 marshalling yards in Hamburg. The train formation was therefore distributed over various locations, and this took considerably longer, because even then, 2,500 wagons had to be sorted every day. Unthinkable for the longest train in Germany. Train number 44727 is almost finished. Pulled by this locomotive, it is scheduled to leave for Scandinavia in 1 hour. The final check by the so-called wagon technician is the last remaining step before departure, and Holger Lang has found something.
This wagon's up for inspection. You can see here, it was last checked on the 5th of March 2009. The wagons are all inspected, wearing parts are replaced. It's like a minor roadworthiness test.
This wagon can make one last trip, then it has to go into the repair workshop. The wagon technician checks that the load is properly stowed and secured, that all doors are closed and not damaged. What's contained inside the rail wagons is something Holger Lang does not normally know.
We don't have to look inside unless we've been specially instructed, or if the doors bulge and there's something pressing against them. Sometimes there's some impact damage, it's been hit by a forklift or something. We just have to make sure the doors are properly locked.
Finally, he checks if all brakes are released. The method he uses is rather unusual.
We have brake pads here. This is the brake shoe. When the brakes are applied, they sound dull. Can you hear it? When the brakes are loose, afterwards they sound bright. Let's take a look here. This should be released. Then it sounds like this when they're off. You can hear if the brakes are off or on.
Everything is fine. The longest train in Germany can set off for Denmark on time. 2,700 feet, more than 40 wagons are slowly set in motion, and that happens 12 times a week. The train runs with a special permission. On all other routes, the maximum permitted length is 2,400 feet. The XXL train takes 3 hours to cover 130 miles. The 2,000 tons are not allowed to move faster than 60 miles per hour. Nevertheless, the train has a braking distance of almost 3,200 feet. The longest train in Germany, one of about 600 trains departing from the largest marshalling yard in Europe every week. This accounts for over 3,000 wagons a day, rolling over 170 miles of rails spread over an area the size of 380 soccer fields. That is the secret behind this impressive aerial photograph. This construction project is breaking records. With a $2 million price tag, a weight of 70 tons and a total length of 1,318 feet, its success is literally hanging by a thread. The bridge's engineer Theo and his son Kevin are trying to achieve the impossible. They want to build Europe's longest suspension bridge with the help of a drone. There's little time until the opening ceremony, and working at 328 feet up in the air is extremely dangerous.
Your life basically depends on someone else's actions.
Are they going to be successful with this bold idea? It's 6 a.m. on an early September day in Reutte in Tyrol, Austria. Europe's longest suspension bridge will soon stretch above this valley. 21-year-old Kevin Lauber is one of the people in charge of the construction. He arrived here from Switzerland yesterday and spent the night in his car right next to the construction site.
The deadlines are tight, and a lot of things could go wrong. We've made all the necessary preparations, but there's no ultimate guarantee.
Kevin has been preparing for this moment for months. Together with his father, he wants to lay the foundation for a multi-million-dollar construction project using only a drone and a thin wire.
We've never used a drone for a project of this size before. The last time we built a large-scale suspension bridge, we worked with a helicopter.
The weather conditions are far from ideal.
Using the drone in the thick fog could be difficult. It affects the GPS of the quadcopters, and that makes it harder to navigate. You'd have to control the drone manually, but that's tricky, especially when it's carrying a load.
They want to use the drone to install the 1,312 feet long pilot cable for the bridge. However, they've never worked with a drone over such a long distance before. It all starts with a thin wire. The drone carries the wire across the valley, connecting what will later become the two ends of the bridge. We'll find out more about the construction process in a little while. Kevin is extremely focused.
The expectations are very high. If you can't keep a cool head, you're not the right person for this kind of job.
Kevin and his father Theo are working on opposite sides of the valley today. Kevin sets up the drone and attaches the thin pilot cable. At the end of the day, the project's success rests on his shoulders. It's still very foggy and his father is basically flying blind. He's going to help him navigate via radio. The slightest gust of wind could cause the wire to snap. Martin Catherine is the technical site manager and initiator of the project. He always believed in the idea of the record-breaking bridge and managed to find 4 private investors for the $1.7 million project.
Well, I did my research. Some people actually don't believe that it's possible. I hope we're in for a positive surprise.
Kevin and Theo decide to proceed despite the grim weather conditions. Efficient communication between father and son is crucial for the success of the drone maneuver.
You'll have to fly at least 13 feet above the treetops.
Once the drone is in the air, Theo has to fully rely on his son.
The drone is about to take off now. I'll be an extra set of eyes for my dad and help navigate the quadcopter. He has to be able to trust me. Precision is very important for this project.
Okay, Achtung, sag mir, wenn Luft. Grad.
I can't see anything. Do you have it under control? Can you see something through the camera? No, I can't. Okay, but is the GPS working? I don't know.
The success of the project is literally hanging by a thread now. The drone is approaching its destination at 12.5 miles per hour. It takes a skillful drone pilot to do that. Just a tad too fast and the wire might snap. And then the wire is suddenly gone.
This is exactly what we were afraid of. The wire got stuck on a mast. I hope we'll manage to get it loose. What am I supposed to do now? Should I just wait until you give me a heads up?
Kevin finds out that the drone arrived on the other side without the wire. It has snapped. He can't do anything but wait. The team on the other side is discussing how to proceed.
We've already dismissed Plan B, contemplated Plan D, and now we're discussing Plan E. It's a good thing that the alphabet has 26 letters.
Theo decides to give it another try, and the drone is being transported back to Kevin. Meanwhile, builders are working on a safety tunnel down in the valley. The new suspension bridge will be built over a busy highway, and objects falling from the bridge could cause fatal accidents. The fog finally clears and the drone is up in the air again.
Nehmen Sie es an Bord! Nimm Kamera! Nimm sie!
This time, the drone has managed to reach its destination without losing the wire. The first thread is now being used to pull over even more threads and increase the thickness. That takes almost an entire day. The result is a steel rope that is strong enough to carry the weight of a heavy bridge cable. A winch will be used to transport the suspension bridge cables across the valley. The precise alignment of those cables is important for the statics of the bridge. Only 35 days left. The suspension cables have been successfully installed and aligned. The actual construction of the bridge can finally begin. The team wants to start with the assembly of the gratings. Kevin is back at the construction site.
Well, my goal for today is to at least get a little further than the highway. I think that would be very good.
They have to install at least 22 gratings per day to complete the construction works before the grand opening. The gratings for the pedestrian walkway are 47 inches wide. Unfortunately, one of the most important people on the construction site isn't fully fit today.
3 of us were carrying a 220-pound metal grating, and it slipped from our hands. I was wearing safety boots, but it hit me higher up the foot, and I broke a metatarsal bone.
Kevin is trying to support his father as much as he can. He never envisioned being a bridge builder. As a matter of fact, only 7 years ago he was still terrified of heights.
It always takes me about 30 minutes to get used to the height when I'm working on a new construction site. But I usually start to enjoy it after a little while.
Kevin is secured to the bridge with a carabiner. Everybody is responsible for their own safety as well as that of their co-workers.
You have to be able to trust your workmates completely. Trust is the prerequisite for this kind of job. Your life basically depends on somebody else's actions.
Kevin is working 196 feet above the ground. He first attaches the bulky brackets to the supporting cables. They will be used for fastening and securing the bridge deck.
They have to push the bracket further down so that we can attach these bars that will later hold the gratings. We have to repeat this process 120 times.
The workers use a trolley to move the 13 feet long steel gratings. One person is in charge of securing the heavy grating to protect the railroad crossing and the highway right below the construction site. The men are on edge.
You have to push harder, use both hands. Don't hold on to the railings, there's no need for that.
The gratings are pushed into place with hands and feet. For more flexibility, the screws won't be tightened before the construction is complete.
Can you move them a little closer together?
Kevin adjusts the suspension cables. They will run closer together in the middle section of the bridge. Theo checks if everything is done according to his calculations.
I'm checking the alignment. The curve of the bridge wasn't quite right, so we had to make a few changes there.
Only when every little detail is right will the bridge be able to hold up to 500 people, even in wind speeds of 37 miles per hour.
Of course, I care about the opening date. But when I'm not 100% satisfied with the project, I can't change that.
Project supervisor Martin Catherine visits the site daily. He's also keeping the investors in the loop. Their patience is being put to the test.
I'm an eternal optimist, but to be honest, I'm approaching my limits. We've already had to increase the buffer once. Now we're hoping that the final amount won't be more than 15 to 20% higher than the estimate. So that would be $2 million.
Time is money, and the construction workers are finally finding their groove. They manage to assemble 16 gratings a day, which equals 164 feet on the bridge deck. If Theo's calculations were accurate, all parts should fit together perfectly in the end.
I can tell you the exact length of the suspension cables, but the length of the walkway is a different story. There's a certain clearance between the different parts. I've built bridges that ended up being 60 feet longer than planned.
Theo and his team will have to wait until the very end to find out the exact length of the new suspension bridge. 7 days until the grand opening. After more than 10 years of planning, the last part of the bridge will finally be completed today. There's only 65 feet of the bridge deck missing. Theo and his workers have been at the construction site since sunrise.
Are you nervous, Theo? There's no time to be nervous.
We're about to find out if Theo's calculations were right. Meanwhile, he's on his way to the connection point.
"68 feet.
68 feet of the bridge deck are still missing. However, the steel gratings are just 65 feet long, too short for the gap. With the finish line so close, everybody wants to help. Even Martin Catherine, the technical site manager, is suddenly operating the excavator.
This is going to be the last part of the bridge deck. In just a few moments, we'll be able to walk across the bridge. I've waited for that moment for over 2.5 years.
The last 19 feet long steel grating is being transported to its destination.
Bleibt so, das ist der Schwiegermutterspalt. Willkommen in Ehrenberg.
They made it. But what about that last gap? That wasn't part of the initial plan.
We're on it. We'll just pull the two sides together with a chain hoist and screw them in place.
The two parts of the bridge deck are pulled together with simple straps. Success at last. The construction crew is overjoyed and visibly relieved.
I had my doubts in the beginning, but Martin was always optimistic and put his heart and soul into this project. I couldn't be happier how it's turned out.
2 members of the crew are missing from the celebration. Theo and Kevin are over on the other side of the valley. They still have a lot of work to do before the grand opening in 7 days. In the evening, father and son finally walk across their bridge for the very first time. Theo is beaming with pride.
My suspension bridges don't sway, they move people.
Finally, after 6 months and 11 days, the construction is finally complete. The 1,332 feet long bridge is now officially Europe's longest suspension footbridge.
Chongqing in China. With 36 million inhabitants and a land area as large as Austria, it's the largest city in the world. And it's the city with the most congestion in China. Commuters here take an average of 55 minutes per journey. "607,000 cars drive here every day. In order to relieve the traffic network, a giant new traffic junction, which connects a total of 8 different directions, is currently being built in the west of the city. This is it. It looks really huge, really high. It's got lots of different levels. To appreciate how big the intersection really is, we turn on the drone camera. Because only from the air is the size of the intersection really clear. The node point stretches across 400,000 square meters. Although this is quite large, the Frankfurt intersection, the largest junction in Germany, covers about the same area. The difference? There are many more branches in Chongqing. A total of 20 on 5 separate levels. Comparable to this is only the Judge Harry Pregerson crossing in Los Angeles. There are 18 branches, but on only 4 levels. And how do you drive on the world's largest intersection? We meet an expert to clarify this. The local driving school teacher Don Yu has had more customers since the construction of the intersection because the junction is a popular test area. Driving student Zhang Yan has her driving test tomorrow. Today, she's meant to prove her skills. Today we'll drive over the complex intersection. It's also part of the test. Do you think you're up for it?
I hope so.
Zhang Yan has already completed 60 driving hours in city traffic. Today is her first time on the highway.
I'm already nervous to drive over such a complicated intersection, especially in the test tomorrow. But if you practice more, you will drive better afterwards.
The driver's license is about 700 euros in Chongqing, significantly cheaper than in Germany. However, you don't really have to drive over a highway intersection of this sort back home. Slowly, using the brake.
I'm afraid of those tracks.
Don't worry, focus on driving. In China, you have to pass a total of 3 practical exams. Zhang Yan has already taken the parking and regular city traffic tests. The highway intersection is the last one. At the next intersection, you have to be extra careful.
Yes, there are many cars.
Driving instructor Don Yu has to grab the steering wheel. Zhang Yan is tense. The heavy traffic scares the student.
Where should I go?
Go, go! And it gets worse. A full emergency stop in the middle of the highway. She would have failed in tomorrow's test. Driving instructor Don Yu maneuvers the car from the intersection with his hand on the steering wheel. This 5-story intersection is the tallest and most complicated one in China. The cars come from 8 different directions.
Driving on this intersection is very complicated and tough. You have to think about where you're going, which lane you're taking, whether to use your indicator lights or not. Otherwise, an accident will happen.
We hope for her she'll do better in tomorrow's test. How do people work on and under the largest intersection in the world? Only 150 meters away from the intersection, there's Mr. Zhao's car repair shop. His shop has been here for the past 20 years. Since the intersection was established, the business has been doing much better because there's a lot of clientele close to the ramp. It's going fine, especially because many cars pass by. If something breaks, they come here for help. I'm happy to work next to the intersection. He's not the only one working here. Also around the intersection, there's still plenty of building going on. It's going to be even bigger. On the north side, another 4-lane road is under construction. It's eventually going to connect North and South Chongqing. The construction costs around 8 million euros. The challenge? This section is located in the middle of a mountain range. This makes the work much more difficult. It's not that easy to transport the building materials here. 7 days a week, 9 hours per day, they dig and level the terrain. The name of the new road, Fumin. That means the convenience of the people. The giant crossing is great for the motorists, but what about those who live here? We see people running over the highway again and again. Unthinkable in Germany. Why are you walking here?
It's illegal, but people live everywhere around here.
There are no pedestrian paths, but a lot of homes. And how do people live around the largest intersection in the world? Only 200 meters away from the giant intersection, Ms. Yun has her apartment. Together with her husband, Ji Chang, she has lived right next to the intersection for 7 years. Ji Chang worked as a graphic artist for 40 years and bought his own house with his savings. Today, however, they live in this 55 square meter apartment on the 28th floor. That's relatively normal for China. But why did they swap their house for the apartment right next to the intersection?
Our house was there in the middle of the construction site area, right there where the highway was to go. Moving here was a good option for us.
When the excavators arrived, the Yuns accepted the government's offer and moved into the replacement apartment. The construction work on the intersection has lasted 7 years. In 2019, it should be ready. This also means construction noise 7 days a week. We measured 80 decibels, as loud as a moving truck.
Yes, but the noise is not that big of a deal. The intersection has made our life easier, and the neighborhood is nicer here.
In fact, the drive to the city center takes only half the time nowadays. Mr. Yun has to visit his sick father every day. For this, it's enough to drive along the entire traffic junction on his tuk-tuk. For him, the intersection is therefore a good thing. It used to take over an hour. Today, it only took me about 40 minutes. So if something urgent happens, I can get to my father quickly. To make sure the intersection isn't just practical, but beautiful as well, dozens of gardeners work under the junction to turn the brown earth into a green oasis. It's heavy work, since the rocky ground offers plenty of resistance. But it's not just about beautifying the intersection.
I think it's good to plant flowers here. That improves the air quality.
20,000 square meters of green will reduce air pollution in the future. Even if many more plants are needed for better air quality, the people of Chongqing benefit from the world's largest intersection.